We are with some hyenas, so finally something with a heartbeat this morning, although they are very, very sleepy, the two of them. I don't think they are going to be interested in doing too much. They look as though it is a dreary grey day, don't they? They are almost kind of eyes are closed, sleepy, and I just can't believe how big they're looking. If you think about these two little balls of fluff, it feels like only yesterday that they were tiny little things wobbling around all over the place at the other den, and now I look at them and they are starting to slowly but surely look more and more like an adult hyena as the days go past. But one thing is for certain is that it is definitely nap time. They probably had a long night of messing around and jumping around all over the place and going everywhere, and so I would imagine that it's now time just to have a little nap. So Louise, you're more than welcome to come join them if you are jealous and want to have nap time. I feel like if you had to lie anywhere near those two, though, you would be probably not sleeping for the next 3 weeks as you scratched yourself silly with fleas, because this den site will be riddled with fleas after they've been here for as long as they have. It's going to be interesting also to see how much longer they stay here, because the trend of this sort of hyena clan over the last few months, or last year should I say, is that they tend to be about 3 months at a den and then they start to sort of shift off. And I think we've already been here now for at least 2 months, or close to 6 weeks. So I wonder if they're going to push off fairly shortly and go to another den site, and where that den site's going to be. It seems as though as they've kind of gone on, they've just gone north, further north every time. So we started off at Philemon's cut line, and we went to Gallagher shortcut. Now we're at Aubrey's. So it's going to be interesting to just check where they go from there. But I'm hoping it's not into Manuleti or into Buffelshoek. It's been so nice having the hyenas around fairly constantly over the last few months. We've seen a lot of them, and we've been able to watch these two grow up, as well as Intima, who I'm wondering where she is. I suppose she's getting to that age now where she does run around all the time and maybe is resting wherever Ribbon and Gwen are this morning, or maybe there's some sort of a food item that everybody's still at, given that it is overcast and cloudy. A number of the hyenas will probably still be quite busy. They're not going to be just sleeping somewhere unless you're a little one like this. They'll still be kind of out and about looking for food. Becca, in order to kind of answer that, it's much like any animal that is territorial. It's always, their territory size is always defined by density. So in some areas you're going to have very small hyena territories. In other areas you're going to have very big hyena territories. It just depends on how many other hyenas are around and how much pushback they're getting from them. Here in the Sabi Sands, we tend to find that we've got quite a high density of hyenas, and so the clan's territorial ranges are not massive. I would say at most we'd find probably a clan ranging maybe 10,000 hectares or 20,000 acres. I mean, obviously there are clans that are bigger than others, and therefore they'll be able to call or section off bigger slices of territory than maybe a smaller clan, but on average that was what I would say is about the size of the clan territories in the Sabi Sands. Of course, if you go into other areas where there's only 1 or 2 spotted hyenas, in something like Pielanesberg National Park, which is in South Africa, there's only one kind of den site for a spotted hyena clan, and so they will have that entire area to themselves, which means they could easily roam, 120,000 acres. So it just depends on how many other hyenas are around, and that goes true for any territorial animal. The more they are, the smaller the territories become, particularly in prime areas where there's food, water, den site availability, and those kind of things. And so it's difficult to answer exactly how big a hyena's territory is. It's just dependent on the area that they're in and the amount of others that they compete with. It's getting harder to tell these two apart now. It used to be a dark and a spotty one, but now they're getting quite similar, so we'll have to come up with other ways. Cardinal Points Farm, you're wondering about the hyena's coat, and will these little cubs eventually lose their fluffy coat, and is it with age that they become sort of finer haired, as you see? Yes, so as they get older, so that hair gets shorter and shorter, and they almost become It's through fighting. No, they won't lose their coat through fighting. It's more that they just grow into it a little bit. And so because they also, as they get older, they're not as reliant on being sort of temperature control. You know, when they're young little animals, things like cold and wet and heat affects them. And so particularly the cold at night, the fluffier coat helps just to kind of insulate them and keep them nice and warm and make sure that they don't get themselves into a situation where they get too cold. So their coats just become finer as they become adults. They basically grow into it. So the length of the fur you'd probably find on an adult is very similar. It's just not as fluffy appearing because the actual size of the body is so much more. Also, I suppose they do fight around carcasses, and so little bits get pulled out here and there, but it's more just the fact that they just basically grow into it, and their hair becomes sort of finer and not as fluffy, and also it becomes more wiry with time as they roll around in sand and mud and all kinds of other things that hyenas get up to, carcasses, and that's when you get that. But interestingly enough, it's a funny thing, because I have seen some adult hyenas that do look fairly fluffy, and one in particular here in Djuma that has that appearance is Pretty. So she's an older female, and she's very fluffy in comparison to the others, and she's got quite a lot of fur around her face. So I suppose there's a bit of genetics in it as well, but mostly as they get older they'll start to lose their thicker, sort of fluffier appearance and become far more fine-haired, and it's probably because they no longer need as much protection from the elements and the weather and to stay as warm as the little cubs do. Look at that. Isn't that two faces of absolute contentment? A safari bat, yes, we do know whose cubs these are. These are for Gwen. So Gwen is one of the females that we see fairly regularly. She's an old female. She's at least 12 years old. So she's a little bit over 12 years old now. She's got lots of tatty ears, and she's got a few scars here and there. And she's a big girl, and one that I'm still not 100% sure of her place within the clan, because originally when I first started here, it was believed that she's a very low-ranking member of the clan, given that her ears are very tatty and the way that she kind of, was denning on her own. But the interactions that I've seen with all the other clan members here at this particular den indicates that Gwen is the most dominant of them, and she's the one that has been very, very defensive of her little one. She's chased a lot of our other hyenas away. She seems to dominate Ribbon quite heavily when they're around. So I don't know if she is as low ranking as we think she is. I think she might be a little bit higher ranking than Ribbon is, and maybe not as high as somebody like Pretty and Madam, who are obviously the matriarchs and that lineage. But I think she's a little bit higher than we first gave her credit for. I don't think she's the bottom of the bottom as I first thought when I got here. She's definitely, the other day when we had all those hyenas here, which was, I think that we had in total, there was about 10 of them here, and she definitely dominated and bossed most of them that were here and chased them all off. Granted, a lot of those were males, but still with Ribbon was a lot more submissive to Gwen than Gwen being submissive to Ribbon, and that indicates that Ribbon is obviously lower down in the spectrum than what Gwen is. But these two little rascals belong to her, and at the moment they're fairly relaxed. It's because Mom's not around. If Mom arrived, and that day when she had that buffalo skin and she came here with a leg, these guys were going crazy and they were all over the place, and lots of squeaking and carrying on that goes on. And so I'm pretty sure that has happened, and maybe Gwen has then disappeared again, and that's why everybody is as sleepy as they are now. Super cute little things, though. Like I say, it's amazing just to see how much they've grown. Shame, guys. Are you tired? Now, in terms of whether they're male or female, I know one is definitely a male. I haven't been able to sex the other one yet. It's very difficult with hyenas. It's not an easy process to sex them. It's not like, lions and leopards and various other animals that we get out here. And so we have to wait for them to be up and standing and moving around, and hopefully for their genitals to be exposed, which I know sounds very bad, but it is true, and that's the only way we can really tell. So we're going to hope that at some stage both of them stand still for 5 seconds, that we can actually get a positive confirmation on who is what, and hopefully we'll be able to know. Now, at one point there was the lighter one and the darker one, and the lighter one was being very submissive the other day at a food item or at when they were suckling, and so I think the darker one might be a female, but difficult to say. Right, well, I think we're going to probably move on from these two. Unfortunately, there's a number of other guys that want to come and see, and so while I move on, Scotty D, I believe, has got another scavenger that we actually saw one just now, not the same species, but unfortunately we didn't have reception, but he'll be able to show you, and I'm sure you'll all love his wise little creature that scavenges.